Hey everybody. So we're going to be looking at INTASC 8. Now in INTASC 7 you guys were reflecting on the instructional planning process as an entire process and how smaller units fit inside larger units. For example, there are many parts or components that fit inside a lesson. There are many lessons that fit inside a unit, and there are many units that fit inside a curricular map for the year. Now with Standard 8, my goal for you guys is to focus on this idea of instructional strategies. What are the tools that we are using in everyday lessons? Okay, so what we can do is we can look at the text from Standard. Standard 8 reads that the teacher understands and uses a variety of instructional strategies to encourage learners to develop deep understanding of content areas and their connections, and to build skills to apply knowledge in meaningful ways. So really what we have there is, we have our idea of, our main idea, instructional strategies. Then we kind of have three sub areas, which I'm going to kind of separate here just for those who want to see it visually. Okay. I don't need this extra one here. So, our main topic is that the teacher understands and uses a variety of instructional strategies. That's definitely our main idea, and we'll get into the key terms in a second. We have our main supporting idea, which has to do with students developing a deep understanding of content areas and making connections. And then lastly, the idea of building skills to apply knowledge in meaningful ways. So what we can do is we can look at these keywords here. So when we say a variety of instructional strategies, this is probably some independent or original support you can put on your reflections. So when we say instructional strategies, I noticed that in reflections to this point, a lot of you have been talking about addressing people's learning styles, which is perfectly fine and good. And that's something that if you certainly could put in the standard reflection, or using a variety of instructional strategies, is going to include visual, audio, and kinesthetic or hands-on activities, because some people learn better in certain ways than others, so we want to have a variety of those things. But also when it comes to this idea of deep understanding and critical thinking and making connections and stuff, we also have to understand what is the aim of our instructional strategy. And that's where we have this rehearsal, elaboration, and organization. We've talked in class about the idea of a pyramid or a tiered structure, where basically maintenance rehearsal, or just rehearsal, is the regurgitation, if you will, of base facts, where I give you a question and you give me an answer, and it's mostly fact-based, vocabulary, or otherwise things that don't really require critical thinking. It's either you can respond to the question or you can't. It's basically rehearsal level learning activities. Now, when we're talking about elaboration, if we can think about the word elaborate, what does that really mean? Well, to elaborate on something means that you put more detail into it. And that is pretty appropriate for how we're using that in education. So the idea with elaborative activities is that we are going to have students elaborate or expand on just the basic facts to try and get some more detail, first of all, so you can deepen the understanding of whatever like some base information could be. Also, you may find incidences in history or local and global events or things like that that you can tie into. But the goal of the elaborative learning strategies or instructional strategies is to take what we've learned, the rehearsal activities, the ability to be able to repeat back and memorize information or facts and things like that, and taking that to the next level of critical thinking, where we can actually understand what that means in context. We can identify real life examples of whatever our concept or our topic is, or otherwise we can make this idea of generalizations. And we did this generalization activity with our shapes that we were trying to draw in class the other day. How we can generalize one term or one concept to a different situation. That is very much elaborative. And then lastly, this idea of organization, which is the ability to sequence events, not only just from past, present, future type of sequencing, but also being able to sequence things from very broad categories to very narrow categories. In that respect, we can start to show or display that information is kind of a structured or tier-based process, if you will. So, for example, I think in the other, not last class, but a few classes ago, we were talking about this idea of organizational learning and being able to structure, and we used concepts from special education, where we have the biggest, think of like the stacking, the little dolls, that the smaller one fits inside the bigger one, and that continues to get this little teeny tiny one. So we could say that we have this whole idea of education, and inside this whole idea of public education and special education, and inside that, we could have mild disabilities or severe disabilities. And then inside, let's say, the mild category, we would have specific learning disabilities, because that's what we're learning right now. And then even within specific learning disabilities, we could talk about, like dyslexia, dysgraphia, or potentially other, let's say, types of like processing disorders or things like that. So you can see how we've basically taken a really broad topic and we've narrowed it down into something that is relatively specific, and that is kind of the idea behind this organizational or tier 3 learning activity or experience, the ability to take what would otherwise be tier 1 or low level information, to be able to sequence it in order to think about multiple concepts together and how they interact together. That kind of is one of the core components of critical thinking, as it were. Okay. And this kind of goes off of what we were talking about just now, this idea that we want to apply knowledge and have an understanding of content areas and their connections. So the connections, this kind of goes with application, and then applying knowledge. It's definitely about application. So definitely probably the key thing that everybody should put somewhere is this idea of we want to go beyond this bottom level or tier 1 rehearsal level knowledge, where kids are just parroting back or regurgitating facts from a worksheet or from for fill-in the bubble test or something like that, and that we're actually providing real life meaning and connection to as much of the core concepts as we can. Okay, so 8A is good because it talks about this idea of differentiated instruction, which is especially important if we're trying to make some specialized tools for children with disabilities. 8A says the teacher uses appropriate strategies and resources to adapt instruction to the needs of individuals and groups of learners, to the needs of individuals and groups of learners. So we talked about this. If we have a particular reading group that needs help on a particular thing, it's our responsibility to be able to differentiate what would be a lesson for the whole class and maybe make some special either activities or features for students who are struggling or maybe need a little bit extra help here or there. And then the next one I have is 8D, which is the teacher varies his or her role in the instructional process. Instructor, facilitator, coach, audience, in relation to the content and purposes of instruction and the needs of learners. This is kind of important because we've talked about the teacher wearing many hats, and we did this a little bit when we're talking about classroom management. that we really want to be a facilitator, well, there are times where we do need to wear slightly different hats. So, for example, sometimes we do need to be the instructor, the person that is basically purveying base level information, because we do need to have a solid core, fundamental understanding before we want to get into anything more critical. My particular favorite is this idea of a facilitator, where we are a guider. We are there as an information source. We are there to help problem solve and troubleshoot, but ultimately it's the student that's going to come up with their own conclusions. Coach, this idea of a motivator to help kids through processes, and this is especially true when we're trying to teach a new process, and this is especially going to be true with reading, fluency, and math. And then sometimes we want to be an audience, and this is especially true when we are trying to talk about more controversial or, let's say, not unsettled topics, at least in the court of public opinion, where we want to sit and we really want the students to be able to express their diverse worldviews and experiences, and don't have us there muddying the waters, as it were, or getting in the way, or possibly interfering with a authentic thought process, or putting any of our even like subconscious influences or biases into it by leaning one way or the other. That can give kind of an implicit feeling of correctness or otherwise incorrectness. And in a discussion, the point isn't always about correctness or incorrectness. It's about looking at multiple points and judging them on merit based on the points. Okay, so this 8 is pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to give you guys a little bit as to get started to it. Like always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to get a hold of me. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.